Okay, so you ever notice how the absolute hardest part of moving something heavy is just getting it started? Well, today we're diving deep into that. We're going to uncover the invisible forces behind that everyday struggle and pull back the curtain on the pushes and pulls that literally govern everything around us.
Yeah, it all comes down to this one simple question. You've felt this before, right? You're trying to shove a heavy box or move some furniture around. That first push takes a ton of effort, but then once it's finally sliding, it suddenly feels, I don't know, easier. So what is actually going on there?
Well, the answer is hiding in plain sight, in a whole world of unseen forces. And to solve this little mystery, we're basically going to become force detectives. We're going to identify every single force in this situation and literally draw a map to understand how they all battle it out.
All right, so here's our scene. A simple box, just sitting there on the floor, not moving. Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to identify all the players, every single force acting on this box, both the obvious ones and the hidden ones.
First up, the most obvious player in the room, the applied force. This is you. It's the push you're putting on the box to try and get it to move. On our force map, we'll just call this one F-app. Simple enough? Next, we've got a force that's always in the game, whether you're pushing the box or not, and that's gravity. It's the constant, relentless pull from the entire planet, just yanking that box straight down. We'll call this one FG. Okay, but wait. If gravity is pulling the box down so hard, why isn't it just crashing right through the floor? Ah, because the floor is pushing back. This upward support force is called the normal force, or Fn. It acts straight up, perpendicular to the surface, and right now it's perfectly canceling out gravity's downward pull. It's a perfect standoff. And here is our main suspect, the force that's causing all the trouble, friction. This is the resistance that happens when two surfaces rub against each other. And the most important clue to remember is that friction always, and I mean always, opposes motion. You push right, friction pushes left. It is the secret villain of our story.
So how in the world do physicists keep track of all these forces? Well, they use a really simple but incredibly powerful tool called a free body diagram. Just think of it as our force detective's map. You just draw the object as a simple dot, and then you add an arrow for every single force acting on it, pointing in the right direction. But here's the thing. These aren't just any old arrows.
You see, to really understand this battle, just knowing the amount of force isn't enough. Not at all. The direction matters just as much. So we have to learn to speak a special language to describe them properly, the language of vectors.
So what's the difference? Well, a scalar is just an amount, a magnitude, like your mass or the time on a clock. But a vector has both a magnitude and a direction. Force is the perfect example. A 50-Newton push to the right, and newtons are just how we measure force, is completely different from a 50-Newton push down. So those arrows on our diagram, they aren't just pictures, they're vectors. Okay, so we've got 4 different force vectors all acting on our box. How do we figure out if the thing is actually going to move? We need a way to combine them all to find the single, overall deciding force.
And that is called the net force. It's simply the sum of all the force vectors acting on our object. And this is really the core of it all. If the net force adds up to 0, the forces are balanced and nothing changes. The box stays put. But if the net force is unbalanced, if it's anything other than 0, the box will accelerate. It will start to move.
The easiest way to picture net force is just a classic game of tug-of-war. You've got forces pulling in opposite directions, and whoever pulls harder determines the outcome. So let's imagine Team A is pulling to the right with a pretty strong force of 200 newtons. And at the exact same time, Team B is pulling to the left, but they're not quite as strong, only 150 newtons of force. So to find the winner, you just subtract the opposing forces. The net force is 50 newtons in Team A's direction. The forces are unbalanced, so the rope is going to accelerate to the right. The stronger team wins. It's that simple. Okay, now let's take this idea and get back to our box. We're pushing it, and our number one suspect, friction, is pushing back. But here's the big twist in the case. It turns out friction isn't just one thing. It actually has 2 different identities. And figuring out which one is which, well, that's the key to solving this whole mystery. So when the box is just sitting there, at rest, we are fighting against static friction. And you can think of this one as a really stubborn force. It perfectly matches your push, getting stronger and stronger as you push harder, but only up to a certain maximum limit.
The very instant, you push hard enough to break its grip and the box starts to slide, the friction changes. It becomes kinetic friction. And here's the kicker. Kinetic friction is weaker.
And that's it. That's the smoking gun right there. That initial, really hard push is you fighting to overcome the maximum strength of static friction, that kind of stickiness between the box and the floor. But once you break that hold, the friction force literally drops down to a lower value, and now you only have to push against the weaker kinetic friction to keep it sliding. Case closed.
All right, now that we've cracked the case of the sliding box, let's test our new detective skills on a slightly more complicated scene. What happens when we take our box and put it on a ramp?
All of a sudden, things get a little trickier. See, gravity still pulls straight down, of course, but the normal force from the ramp is now pushing up at an angle. They don't perfectly cancel each other out anymore. And this is where understanding vectors becomes like a superpower.
Using our new vector skills, we can actually split the single force of gravity into two separate parts, or components. One part pulls the box directly into the ramp, and that's the part the normal force has to balance out now. But the other part pulls the box down along the ramp's surface, and that's the force that's trying to make it slide. It's a whole new tug of war.
So after all this, what's the one key thing you should take away from our entire investigation? It all comes down to this. Force isn't just a number, it's a vector. It has a size, and it has a direction. And to really understand why things move, you have to add up all those different vectors to find the one thing that really matters, the net force.
You know, we started with a really simple question about pushing a box, and we ended up mapping this whole invisible battle of pushes and pulls. So the next time you go for a walk, or drive your car, or even just watch a leaf fall from a tree, think about the forces at play. What hidden battles are you going to see now?